The hunter has become the hunted. In a stunning reversal of fortune that nobody saw coming, the very prosecutor who tried to take down President Trump is now facing federal investigation herself. Fani Willis, the Fulton County District Attorney who led Georgia's election interference case against Donald Trump, just received a federal grand jury subpoena from the Department of Justice. This isn't just another legal development. This is the beginning of what could be the most significant political reckoning in modern American history. The Biden administration's weaponized justice system is being systematically dismantled, and the architects of lawfare against Trump are now facing the consequences of their actions. According to breaking reports from the New York Times, federal investigators have issued a grand jury subpoena demanding records related to Fani Willis's travel history during the fall of 2024, specifically around the time of the presidential election. This development comes from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Georgia, led by Theodore Hertzberg, and represents a seismic shift in the political landscape. The scope of this investigation remains classified under grand jury secrecy rules, but the timing tells us everything we need to know. Willis traveled overseas during the critical election period, and federal investigators want to know exactly what she was doing, where she went, and who was funding these trips. This isn't a routine inquiry. This is a targeted investigation into potential corruption, foreign interference, or worse. The woman who spent years trying to criminalize Trump's legitimate efforts to ensure election integrity is now under the microscope for her own potentially illegal activities during the most consequential election in American history.
This investigation into Willis comes just one day after former FBI Director James Comey was indicted on charges of making false statements to Congress and obstruction of justice. The timing isn't coincidental, it's systematic. President Trump's Justice Department is methodically working through the list of individuals who participated in the unprecedented weaponization of federal law enforcement against a sitting president and presidential candidate. Comey, who orchestrated the Russia hoax and abused his position to undermine the Trump presidency, now faces the same type of prosecution he helped unleash on innocent Americans. Willis, who brought bogus RICO charges against Trump for exercising his constitutional rights to challenge election irregularities, is now experiencing what it feels like to be on the receiving end of federal scrutiny. This is exactly what accountability looks like, and it's long overdue. For too long, the deep state operatives and partisan prosecutors believed they were untouchable, that they could destroy their political enemies without consequence. To understand why Willis is now under investigation, we need to examine the spectacular collapse of her case against President Trump. Willis brought charges against Trump and 18 co-defendants under Georgia's RICO statute, alleging they formed a criminal enterprise to overturn the 2020 election results. But her case was never about justice. It was about politics, persecution, and personal gain. The entire prosecution fell apart when details emerged about Willis's corrupt relationship with Nathan Wade, the special prosecutor she hired to run the case. Wade, who had no experience in RICO prosecutions, was paid over $654,000 in taxpayer funds while engaging in a romantic relationship with Willis. Bank records revealed that Wade used this taxpayer money to fund lavish vacations with Willis, including cruises to the Caribbean, trips to Napa Valley, and luxury getaways to Aruba and Miami. This wasn't just a conflict of interest. It was a clear case of self-dealing and potential embezzlement of public funds.
The Willis-Wade romance scandal exposed the fundamental corruption at the heart of the Georgia prosecution. Wade filed for divorce from his wife on November 1, 2021, just one day after Willis hired him for the Trump case. This timing wasn't coincidental, it was calculated. Willis and Wade constructed an elaborate scheme to funnel taxpayer money into their personal relationship while persecuting the leading candidate for president of the United States. When confronted with evidence of their corruption during court hearings, Willis displayed the arrogance and defiance that characterized her entire prosecution. She argued that personal relationships among lawyers don't constitute conflicts of interest, completely ignoring the fact that she was using public resources to fund her romantic escapades. Her testimony was combative, evasive, and revealed someone who believed she was above the law. When defense attorneys questioned her about the financial arrangements, Willis famously declared, "I'm not on trial, no matter how hard you try to put me on trial." Well, it appears she was wrong about that. The Georgia Court of Appeals saw through Willis's corruption and ruled that she and her entire office must be disqualified from the case due to the appearance of impropriety. This wasn't a close call. It was a unanimous decision that Willis's conduct was so egregious that it compromised the entire prosecution. The court found that Willis's relationship with Wade created an actual conflict of interest that required her removal. Last week, the Georgia Supreme Court declined to hear Willis's appeal, effectively ending her involvement in the case and leaving the prosecution in limbo. President Trump called the decision great and said Willis should be put in jail because she's a criminal. These weren't just political attacks, they were accurate assessments of Willis's corrupt conduct. The appeals court decision vindicated what Trump supporters knew all along. The Georgia prosecution was a politically motivated witch hunt led by corrupt prosecutors who were willing to abuse their power for personal and political gain.
The federal investigation into Willis represents more than just accountability for one corrupt prosecutor. It signals a fundamental shift in how justice will be administered under the Trump administration. For years, we watched as partisan prosecutors like Willis, Alvin Bragg in Manhattan, and Letitia James in New York used their offices to wage lawfare against President Trump and his supporters. They perverted the justice system, turning it into a weapon of political persecution rather than an instrument of equal justice under law. These prosecutors believed they could destroy Trump's political future through endless indictments, frivolous prosecutions, and manufactured controversies. They were wrong. Not only did their lawfare strategy fail to stop Trump's return to the presidency, but it actually strengthened his political position by exposing the corruption of the justice system. Now, with Trump back in power and committed to restoring the rule of law, these corrupt prosecutors are facing the consequences of their actions. The timing of Willis's overseas travel during the 2024 election raises serious questions about potential foreign interference in American elections. While Willis was prosecuting Trump for allegedly attempting to interfere in the 2020 election by challenging suspicious vote counts and demanding election integrity, she was traveling internationally during the most sensitive period of the 2024 campaign. What was she doing overseas? Who was she meeting with? Who funded these trips? These are the questions federal investigators are now asking, and Willis's refusal to comment suggests she has something to hide. This investigation could reveal a pattern of foreign influence in American prosecutions that goes far beyond what we previously understood. If Willis was coordinating with foreign entities or receiving funding from international sources while prosecuting a presidential candidate, that would represent the most serious election interference scandal in American history.
The Willis investigation must be understood within the broader context of the weaponized justice system that targeted President Trump and his supporters. This wasn't just about one prosecutor in Georgia. It was a coordinated campaign involving federal agencies, state prosecutors, and international partners to prevent Trump's return to power. The FBI raided Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago. The Department of Justice indicted him on multiple fronts. And prosecutors in New York and Georgia brought charges that had never been applied to any political figure in American history. Meanwhile, actual crimes by Democrats were ignored or covered up. Hillary Clinton's email server, Hunter Biden's laptop, Joe Biden's classified documents, and the systematic censorship of conservative voices were all treated as non-issues by the same justice system that pursued Trump relentlessly. This two-tiered system of justice represented the greatest threat to American democracy since the Civil War, and it's finally being held accountable. President Trump's response to Willis's disqualification and subsequent investigation has been measured but firm. He has consistently maintained that the prosecutions against him were politically motivated witch hunts, and events have proven him correct. The collapse of Willis's case, the exposure of her corruption, and the federal investigation into her conduct represent complete vindication for Trump's position. When Trump said the system was rigged against him, critics dismissed it as the complaints of a sore loser. When he said the prosecutors were corrupt, the media called it an attack on democratic institutions. When he predicted that the truth would eventually come out, his enemies laughed. They're not laughing now. The systematic exposure of prosecutorial misconduct, the collapse of multiple cases, and the beginnings of accountability measures prove that Trump was right all along about the corruption of the justice system.
The investigation into Willis is just the beginning of what promises to be a comprehensive accountability agenda under the Trump administration. President Trump has made it clear that the individuals who weaponize the justice system against him and his supporters will face consequences for their actions. This isn't about revenge. It's about restoring the rule of law and ensuring that no future administration can abuse prosecutorial power for political purposes. The American people deserve to know the full extent of the corruption that infected our justice system during the Biden years. They deserve to see accountability for those who perverted the law for partisan gain. And they deserve assurance that such abuses will never happen again. The Willis investigation represents the first step in this accountability process, but it won't be the last. Democrats and their media allies are already panicking about the implications of the Willis investigation and the broader accountability agenda. They're claiming that Trump is politicizing the justice system and targeting his enemies for revenge. This is rich coming from the same people who spent 4 years trying to destroy Trump through lawfare and weaponized prosecutions. The difference is that Trump's accountability measures are based on actual evidence of wrongdoing, not manufactured controversies and twisted interpretations of law. Willis genuinely appears to have engaged in corrupt conduct. Comey genuinely appears to have made false statements to Congress, and other former officials genuinely appear to have abused their power. The Trump administration isn't inventing crimes, it's prosecuting real ones that were ignored by the previous administration because they were committed by Democrats.
The Willis investigation represents a turning point in American justice. For too long, we've had a two-tiered system where Democrats could commit crimes with impunity, while Republicans faced prosecution for activities that weren't even illegal. This corrupt system undermined public faith in our institutions and threatened the foundation of our republic. The Trump administration's commitment to equal justice under law, regardless of political affiliation, represents a return to constitutional principles and the rule of law. This won't be easy. The deep state and its allies will fight back against any accountability measures. But the American people have spoken clearly. They want justice restored, corruption punished, and the weaponized system reformed. The Willis investigation is just the beginning of this crucial work. The federal investigation into Fani Willis marks the beginning of the end for the corrupt prosecutors who weaponized our justice system against President Trump. After years of persecution, lawfare, and abuse of power, accountability is finally coming. Willis thought she was untouchable when she was prosecuting Trump with taxpayer-funded vacations and manufactured charges. She was wrong. The American people have restored Donald Trump to the presidency specifically to clean up this corruption and restore the rule of law. The Willis investigation proves that no one is above the law, not even the prosecutors who thought they were. Justice is being restored, accountability is coming, and the American people are finally getting the equal treatment under law that our Constitution promises. This is just the beginning.